It was a Saturday evening in late September, just cool enough to wear a jacket but still warm enough that the breeze felt nice against your skin. We were at her brother Luke's house, tucked deep in the Oregon countryside where pine trees outnumbered people, and the air always smelled faintly of wood smoke and wet moss. He and his wife had offered to host our 6th wedding anniversary, a small family dinner. Low-key, casual, the kind of event that didn't require much planning. Just food, drinks, and faces that had known each other for years. We arrived around 5. I remember that clearly because the sun was just beginning to drop behind the trees, casting this amber light across the driveway as we pulled in. She wore this soft green sweater I'd always liked, her hair twisted up loosely like she hadn't tried but still somehow looked perfect. I was the one who had reminded her that it was our anniversary coming up, a few days earlier. She'd seemed genuinely surprised, grateful even, and said Luke had already planned something for us. I didn't question it. I'd learned over the years that she preferred handling things her way, and maybe I'd become too used to stepping back. Inside, the house buzzed with activity. Her sister-in-law was busy arranging plates and fussing over the charcuterie board. Their teenage nephew was trying to get the Bluetooth speaker to sync, grumbling under his breath. There were candles lit, music playing softly, and the kind of laughter that floats easily between people who've shared too many holidays to bother with small talk. Everything seemed normal, comfortable even, but that's the trick, isn't it? The way betrayal doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm, but more like a shift in the wind. Something you can't quite name until it's already pulling you under. At one point during dinner, I stepped outside to check my phone. I told them I needed to respond to something for work, but really, I just wanted a breather. The kitchen had grown hot from the oven and the wine, and I needed a moment to gather myself. I stood on the front porch, scrolling through a few unread texts. One from my boss about a scheduling conflict next week. Another from my sister asking about the Oregon weather. Nothing pressing. It was quiet outside. Just the hum of insects, the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog far off in the distance. I remember thinking how still everything felt, like a moment suspended in amber. Then I turned back toward the house. As I walked past the hallway that led to the guest rooms, I caught a flicker of movement. The door to the guest bedroom was half closed but not fully shut. Normally, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. People take calls, step away, whatever. But I slowed down, just a little. Something made me pause. That's when I heard it. Her voice soft, but not soft enough. Muffled by the half-closed door, but still unmistakably hers. Not her casual tone either. Not the voice she used with family or at work. This was different. Lower, slower, careful. And then, a second voice. Male. Also hushed. Then a short laugh, hers. Not a burst of laughter. Not the kind you share over a funny story. This was the laugh you give someone in a moment of closeness. Familiar, comfortable, private. Then nothing. No movement. No more talking. Just silence. I stood there for a second too long. My hand hovered near the bathroom door as if I was deciding whether to enter. But I wasn't. I wasn't thinking clearly at all. It felt like my body had frozen. Like my heart had realized something before my mind caught up. I didn't knock. I didn't open the door. I just stood there like an idiot, listening to the walls. A few minutes later, I heard the floor creak behind me. I turned, too quickly, and there she was, walking down the hall with a plate of sliced cheesecake and that same calm expression she always wore at family gatherings. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look surprised to see me there. She smiled, held up the plate and said, "They were asking for dessert." Her cheeks were slightly flushed, but not in a way anyone else would have noticed. Her hair was a little more tousled, but again subtle. If I hadn't heard those voices, I would have thought nothing of it. But I had, and something in me shifted. I followed her back to the dining room. The conversation picked up where it had left off. Someone was retelling a story about a high school prank. Her dad was chuckling, leaning back in his chair. Someone passed a bottle of wine. Everything resumed like clockwork. And she slid back into her seat beside me like she belonged there, like nothing had happened. She leaned into my arm and whispered, "You okay? "You look tired." I forced a nod. "Just zoning out." She kissed my shoulder lightly, just enough to seem affectionate in front of everyone else. That should have comforted me. Didn't. All night, I replayed that hallway moment over and over again in my head. The tone in her voice, the laugh, the way she hadn't explained where she'd been, hadn't offered a story, hadn't looked guilty. But maybe that was what unsettled me most. Her calmness, like this was routine. For the rest of the evening, I watched her through a different lens. When she refilled people's drinks, when she touched my hand at the table, when she got up to help clean the dishes, I noticed how easily she navigated everything, like she'd rehearsed every line, every smile, every gesture. By the time we left, I hadn't said a word about it. The drive back home was quiet. She leaned her head against the window and said, "That was nice, huh?" I just said, "Yeah," and focused on the road. But inside, something was boiling. Slowly, silently. It hadn't erupted yet, but I felt it. It wasn't just suspicion. It was something deeper, a growing certainty I couldn't quite name, like catching a shadow just outside your peripheral vision. Something you can't prove, but know is real. That night, I lay awake next to her while she slept soundly, her breath steady and untroubled. I stared at the ceiling, wondering why everything suddenly felt hollow, like I was living inside a painting of our marriage, not the real thing. I thought back to the beginning, to when I first fell for her. The late-night talks, the road trips, the way she used to light up when she saw me walk into a room. Was that version of her still there? Or had she slowly become someone else while I wasn't paying attention? I didn't know. But what I did know was this. Something had changed that night. Not on the surface, but underneath. Deep in the foundation of what we'd built. A crack had formed. And whether I wanted to or not, I could feel myself beginning to follow it. We drove home from Luke's that night without speaking much. She leaned her forehead against the passenger side window, watching the pine trees disappear into darkness, her breath occasionally fogging the glass. I focused on the road, the centerline blurring into a single endless thread. I think she was humming softly to herself. Something tuneless, familiar, but aimless. She had no idea that something inside me had cracked wide open. I didn't mention what I'd heard. I didn't ask questions. I wasn't ready. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I wasn't sure I could survive hearing them yet. Instead, I waited. I watched. I became something I never imagined I'd be in my own marriage. An observer. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. That people have private conversations at family events all the time. That I must have misheard the tone, misjudged the moment. But the seed had been planted. And it didn't take long before it started growing, reaching backward through time, unearthing things I had previously explained away. Little moments began resurfacing. Like the week before the dinner, when she suddenly needed to take a client call during a Saturday brunch at her favorite cafe. She stepped outside, phone pressed to her ear, pacing in front of the parked cars. When she came back, she was smiling, but distant, like she'd just been somewhere I couldn't follow. Or the way she'd beg and guarding her phone like it held state secrets. At night, she'd plug it in on her side of the bed, face down, and with the screen brightness dimmed so low that you couldn't see a thing unless you were looking at it head-on. She used to leave it charging in the kitchen. I told myself she was just being more careful about work boundaries. Even her texts had changed. Shorter, more punctuated. The little emojis she used to sprinkle in had stopped entirely. I noticed it the way you notice when music stops playing in the background of a restaurant. You don't know exactly when it vanished, just that it did. The more I looked, the more I saw. She had become, how do I say this? Scripted, like she was performing normalcy, asking me about my day but not really listening to the answer, laughing at shows we used to love, but not at the same jokes. Sometimes she'd comment on an episode we hadn't even watched yet, and I'd just nod, pretending I didn't catch the slip. One afternoon, I came home early from work. She was sitting on the back deck, alone, sipping white wine at 3 in the afternoon. Her laptop was open, but she quickly closed it when she saw me. "Surprise early day?" she asked, her voice light. Yeah, I said. Slow at the office. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek, but her eyes didn't match her tone. They never used to look past me. Another day, she came home from one of her overnight conferences, a term that had started showing up more and more lately, with no paper trail, no emails confirming hotel bookings, no calendar events, just her suitcase packed, her hair done a little too perfectly for a budget industry seminar. That day, I noticed a small mark on her neck. Nothing huge, just a faint reddish patch, sharper than a bruise, too precise to be random. She caught me staring at it and laughed. "Curling iron accident," she said, running her fingers across it casually. "Remind me not to rush next time." I nodded, smiled, let it go. But that night, the same curling iron sat on the bathroom counter, unplugged, untouched, cold. I wish I could say that I confronted her right then, that I had the strength to demand the truth. But I didn't. I told myself that maybe I'd finally become one of those paranoid spouses who invent stories in their heads. That stress from work, from life, from growing older together was playing tricks on me. But the worst part wasn't the doubt. It was the clarity that slowly started to form through it. Because deep down, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I had seen the signs long before that dinner. I just ignored them, like the time she lost the photos from our anniversary trip to Seattle. She blamed a corrupted SD card. That had seemed plausible then. But now, I wondered if the trip we took together had overlapped with a different narrative, one that existed outside the frame. Or the countless nights she would get home late from work and be too tired to talk. I always gave her space, always tried to be understanding. But now I saw those nights differently. Not as exhaustion, but as erasure. Like she'd been living a whole other life before stepping back into ours. She started going to yoga 3 times a week. Sometimes she'd come back flushed and glowing. Other times, she'd return looking somehow emptied out yet satisfied. Her mat was clean, but her smile wasn't. I'd once joked about joining her for a class. She brushed it off quickly. "It's kind of my sanctuary," she'd said, already walking out of the room. "You wouldn't like it." That night, I Googled the yoga studio. No class at that time. Not even an instructor by the name she had mentioned. Still, I didn't say anything. Why? I don't know. Maybe because I wasn't ready to shatter the illusion. Maybe because silence felt safer than confirmation. But silence became its own kind of poison. I remember one night, this was maybe a week after the dinner. I sat in bed, scrolling through photos on my phone. I reached one of us taken 2 summers ago on a hike. She was smiling wide, squinting into the sun. My arm was around her. We looked happy, whole, and I felt like I was looking at strangers. Not because of what had changed, but because of what I'd missed while it changed. I started questioning myself. Had I stopped being enough for her? Had I gotten too complacent? Too caught up in routines and work and predictable Friday nights with takeout and Netflix? Was this my fault? The thoughts churned like storm clouds, and I couldn't outrun them. That's when I started waking up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, chest tight. I'd glance over at her sleeping peacefully, curled up with her back to me, and I'd feel like there was a stranger lying next to me. And yet, every morning, we moved through the house like clock hands, brushing teeth side by side, folding laundry, making coffee. Sometimes she'd kiss me goodbye and smile, and I'd think, how long has this been going on? How long have I been the only one who didn't know? Looking back, the truth was never hidden. I just didn't want to see it. Or maybe I did, and that's what scared me most. I had let love blind me. I had traded awareness for comfort. And now I was waking up in a home filled with echoes of a marriage that was already unraveling. Piece by piece, the pattern emerged. Not in grand revelations, but in whispers, in timing that didn't add up, in stories that sounded borrowed, in moments when her body was there, but her heart was clearly somewhere else. And all I could do was watch and wait, because something told me the full truth hadn't arrived yet. But it was coming. There's this moment, right before you do something that crosses a line you told yourself you'd never cross, where time slows down. You can feel the pulse in your neck, the sweat on your palms, the rational part of your brain screaming, don't do it. And yet, the fear of not knowing becomes louder than your own conscience. That's where I was. Sitting in my home office, lights dimmed, staring at the screen of a second-hand laptop I'd set up for one reason: to watch the data. For a week, I'd been collecting signals. I'd installed a simple piece of software on our router that monitored connected devices and tracked their traffic. Just IPs, activity patterns, device names. It wasn't spyware. I wasn't hacking her phone. But I was looking, actively, deliberately, and even though I hated what that said about me, I hated the uncertainty more. Started small. Every time she said she was at yoga or at work, I checked the logs. At first, it was inconclusive. She'd turn her phone to airplane mode during certain hours, which I told myself could mean anything. Maybe she just wanted to unplug. But then her laptop started showing up on the network when she was supposedly gone. Randomly. Briefly. Enough to raise an eyebrow. One evening, she left the house for what she said was a women's networking event downtown. I pretended not to notice that she wore the same perfume she used to save for our anniversaries. She even did her hair the way I loved most: loose, soft waves, the kind she said she didn't have the energy for anymore. About 20 minutes after she left, her laptop lit up on the home network. I felt my stomach drop. I walked into the bedroom. It was sitting on her side of the bed, lid closed, screen still warm. She'd forgotten to turn it off. I opened it. No password required. A moment of weakness? A trap? I didn't care anymore. The desktop was clean. Too clean. But one window was minimized: FaceTime. I clicked it, and there he was. The same guy I'd seen briefly at her brother's house. Handing her a drink. Sharing that laugh in the hallway behind a barely shut door. On the screen now, he was lounging shirtless on a bed I didn't recognize. She was there too, sitting on the edge, her hair down, a glass of wine in one hand, her eyes glowing with familiarity. They weren't talking like people sneaking around. They were talking like people who'd been doing this for a while. Comfortable. Routine. She asked him about his day. He teased her about something she said earlier. She smiled. This unfiltered, radiant smile I hadn't seen in months. They didn't see me. I kept the volume muted. The screen dimmed. I shouldn't have kept watching. But I couldn't look away. I needed to see it, to let it burn through the last layer of denial still clinging to me. At some point, they kissed. Then she leaned back on the bed beside him. I closed the laptop, sat there in silence. It was done. There was no more room for rationalizing or hoping I was wrong. No more making excuses or pretending it was emotional distance or stress or whatever lies I'd fed myself over the last few months. She wasn't confused. She wasn't lost. She was with someone else. Not just physically, but fully, emotionally, deliberately, and I had never been a part of it. When she got home that night, her eyes were bright, cheeks slightly flushed. She walked in like nothing had happened, kissed me on the cheek, told me the panel discussion went long. I nodded, said nothing, pretended everything was normal. But something in me had broken, not loudly, not explosively, just quietly, permanently. Over the next few days, I watched her more than I interacted with her. I paid attention to every detail. How she always checked the hallway before she took a call. How she smiled when texting someone. This particular kind of smile, tight-lipped and tilted. How she became extra affectionate out of nowhere, as if she sensed a shift in me and was trying to course correct. I didn't react. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started collecting. Her laptop browser history was spotless, as I expected. But the router showed otherwise. There were video call metadata logs, a flurry of activity at specific hours when she was out. Consistent connections to a cloud folder she'd never mentioned. I didn't open the folder. Not yet. Just logged the IPs, the timestamps, the patterns. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger anymore. I just wanted the truth. I wanted to own the moment when the lies ended, not have it stolen from me again. I began keeping a file. **TS. Device logs. I even purchased a refurbished phone and synced it with the router account so I could check from work. Every time she claimed to be at a client dinner or late-night meeting, I checked. Almost always, her laptop or phone lit up back home, inside these walls. Her location services were turned off, but her digital footprint never lied. One night, I heard her talking in the other room. I walked toward the living room, barefoot, slow. She didn't hear me. Her voice was soft, sweet, that tone she used to reserve for private jokes between us. Then silence. Then a whisper. I wish I was there. I stepped back, went to the kitchen. She came in a few minutes later, phone tucked away, smile ready. Hey, she said, reaching for a glass. You okay? You've been quiet lately. I nodded. Just tired. She leaned in, touched my arm. You know I love you, right? That almost broke me. I love you. 3 words that now felt like ash in her mouth. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for a moment I tried to remember how we got here. 6 years of marriage. 11 years together. We'd traveled, celebrated, fought, cried, laughed. We'd shared a bed, a bank account, 1,000 breakfasts and late-night TV shows. And yet, somehow, she had carved out a whole other world behind closed doors, behind passwords and work trips and yoga classes that never existed. And I had let her, not by permission, but by omission, by not wanting to see, by not asking sooner, by not listening to my gut when it first began whispering, something's not right. I couldn't fix it. I didn't want to fix it anymore. I wanted out of the lie, but not until I had the truth in my hands. A few days later, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while grabbing something from the car. A rare lapse. I didn't hesitate. I opened it. No passcode. I moved quickly, with a steadiness I didn't know I had. The messaging app was filled with him. Not just recent texts, but years of conversations, synced from a backup I guess she didn't realize was still enabled. What I saw confirmed what I already knew, but added a weight I hadn't anticipated. This wasn't a fling. This was a second life. They had names for each other. Inside jokes. Shared Spotify playlists. Coordinated meetups in cities we never even visited. There were photos, videos, voice messages. Things I wish I could unsee, unhear, unfeel. Discussions about me. How to hide it. When to lie. Times she pretended to be out with friends while she was actually in his apartment. And worst of all, plans. Real plans. Trips. Ideas about what could be if things changed. If she finally decided. I sent every file to my encrypted drive, logged out, closed the phone, and set it down exactly where I found it. She walked back in a minute later, holding a grocery bag and smiling like nothing had shifted. But everything had. Because now I wasn't doubting anymore. I wasn't guessing or assuming or chasing ghosts. I knew. And the weight of that knowledge was a kind of freedom, cold, silent, unshakable. It was time. I always imagined that if I were ever cheated on, if I ever found out my wife had been with someone else, I'd feel rage. Some red-hot, explosive fury that would surge through my chest and demand retribution. I thought I'd scream, maybe break something. I thought it'd look like a movie scene. Chaotic, loud, cathartic. But it didn't happen like that. What happened instead was silence. After reading those messages and seeing those images on her phone, things I can't unsee no matter how badly I want to, I didn't feel anger. Not immediately. Not even sadness, really. What settled over me was a kind of stillness. Heavy. Hollow. Like someone had turned off the sound inside my body. That night, she came home from work at her usual time. Walked through the door with 2 reusable grocery bags in her arms and a smile on her face. Like the world hadn't just tilted sideways. Like she hadn't unknowingly handed me every wee *p* and I'd need to dismantle our life together. Hey! She called from the kitchen, rustling through the bags. They had your favorite granola bars on sale, so I grabbed 2 boxes. I stood in the hallway, keys still in hand, staring at her like she was a stranger. She looked up. What's wrong? I shook my head. Nothing. Just tired. She nodded, brushing hair behind her ear. Yeah, me too. She said it so casually, so automatically. It made my skin crawl. That was the beginning of what I can only describe as emotional dissociation. I went to work. I came home. I helped with dinner. I laughed at the appropriate times during whatever show we were watching. I slept in the same bed as her. But I wasn't there. Not really. I had started detaching quietly and thoroughly, piece by piece. It wasn't a decision I made consciously. It just happened. Something inside me, whatever part had still been holding on to hope, or love, or denial, shut off like a light switch. And what was left was function. I functioned. She, on the other hand, began to change in the opposite direction. More attentive, more present, like something in her had sensed the drift and was trying to counterbalance it before it became permanent. She started texting me during the day again, little things, thinking of you, or how's your afternoon going? She'd kiss me goodbye before work, linger for just a second longer. She offered to make my lunch, suggested we go away for a weekend, somewhere near the coast, just the two of us. No phones. She even asked if I wanted to go to yoga with her. That made me pause. Not because I believed the offer was genuine, but because it was such a shift in behavior, it almost felt like desperation. I told her I had a deadline and couldn't make it. She smiled and said, "Maybe next week." The version of me she was trying to reach didn't exist anymore. I had stopped reacting. That was the new pattern. I no longer met her efforts with enthusiasm or skepticism. I just observed. Not coldly, not cruelly, just absent. Detached. She didn't know I had the messages, the photos, the call logs, the timelines. She didn't know I had watched her talk to him. Had read the line where she said, "It's different with you. I feel seen with you." She didn't know that line had hit me harder than anything else. Not because she said it, but because I realized I had believed, for so long, that I had been seeing her, loving her, knowing her, and I hadn't. Not really. Maybe I never had. And yet, somehow, I didn't hate her. That was the strangest part of all. I didn't feel the hatred people always warn you about. I felt the absence of something, like the volume had been turned down on my entire emotional range. She'd be talking to me, laughing even, and I'd hear her voice as if from another room, muted, distant. Sometimes I'd watch her fold laundry or brush her teeth and think, she has no idea it's over. Not yet. But it is. She was trying harder, that much was obvious. Her conversations with me became more thoughtful. She asked about my coworkers by name, started cooking again, real meals, not just reheated leftovers. She even lit candles at dinner one night. I wondered if she was trying to recover something she couldn't name, or if the weight of the lie had grown too heavy to carry casually. One night, she walked into the bedroom wearing an old sweatshirt of mine, one I hadn't seen in years. She curled up next to me on the bed and said, "Remember when we used to do puzzles on the floor? God, that first winter in the apartment." She trailed off, looking at me expectantly, like she wanted me to finish the memory. I nodded. "Yeah." Silence hung between us. "You're so quiet lately," she said. "Is everything okay?" I turned to her. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Just feels like we're off, like you're somewhere else." I shrugged. "Maybe we're just tired." She smiled sadly. "Yeah, maybe." She didn't press. And I didn't offer anything more, because what could I say? "You're right. I've been quiet because I watched you sit on a bed with another man and smile like you used to smile at me. I read the messages where you planned weekends together, called him your secret, your escape, your real. And I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just let a part of myself turn off and start counting down the days until I could leave you without shattering whatever was left of my sanity. No, I couldn't say that. Not yet. So I kept nodding, kept pretending. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the fact that she still looked at me like I was in this with her, like we were on the same page, like the version of me she had created in her head, the trusting husband, the soft landing, still existed. She didn't see that I was already gone. I think part of her knew something had shifted. She became restless, started staying up later, fidgeting, scrolling through her phone, then hiding it again, asking questions she never used to ask, like, "Do you still want to be with me?" Or, do you ever think about starting over somewhere new? I answered the same way every time. Calm. Vague. Safe. It was a performance. For both of us. She was pretending to be invested. I was pretending to still be fooled. But behind the curtain, I was planning my exit. I had *N consulting a lawyer. Quietly, discreetly, I made copies of everything, backed up the texts, cataloged the calls, screen recorded the video. I organized everything into folders on an external drive I hid beneath the false bottom of my desk drawer. I started withdrawing, not just emotionally but practically. I opened a new checking account, put a pause on any joint purchases, changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy, redirected my mail to a private P.O. box. It was methodical, not vengeful, not dramatic, just necessary. Because I realized something, she'd already left me, long before I ever read a message or saw a photo. She left me the first time she told him she missed him. The first time she smiled when she lied to my face and said she was heading to yoga. The first time she looked at her phone and felt something I hadn't made her feel in years. And now I was just catching up. There's a strange calm that comes when you finally decide to stop pretending. When you cross that last internal boundary, the one between endurance and exit. It doesn't feel like you're giving up. It feels like you're waking up. That's where I was. Not angry, not heartbroken, just awake. Once I made the decision to leave, my thoughts became clearer than they had been in months. It was like stepping outside after being in a stuffy room too long. The air was different. My priorities shifted instantly. No more doubt. No more questioning her behavior or decoding her mood swings. I was past that. Now I was focused. I gave myself 2 weeks. 14 days to prepare everything I'd need. Financials, legal groundwork, personal items, digital access, copies of everything. I didn't rush. I moved carefully, quietly, like someone sneaking out of a house that wasn't safe anymore. Every morning, I woke up next to her, made coffee, kissed her on the forehead, and silently crossed another day off the list. One day, her phone buzzed during breakfast. She was in the shower. I looked over instinctively. The message preview was short, a name I recognized. It wasn't him. It was a friend of his, someone I barely knew, but had seen tagged in their messages. The text said, "Same spot Thursday?" That was it. I let the screen go dark. Later that day, I checked our shared calendar. Something she hadn't used in months, but which I had maintained out of habit. Thursday had one vague entry in her handwriting, "Client debrief." I didn't feel shocked, or sick, or anything, really. It was confirmation, one more notch in the belt of certainty. That night, I waited until she fell asleep, and then I opened her laptop again. This time, I didn't browse casually. I went deep. Email drafts, browser history, file downloads. What I found wasn't surprising, but it was comprehensive. Photos, dates, *TS of hotel confirmations. Even rideshare receipts from months ago that didn't match the locations she had told me about. Messages coordinating fake alibis with friends who, based on what I now understood, had likely been covering for her all along or at least playing dumb. The worst of it was a folder tucked neatly inside a work subfolder. It was labeled innocently enough. Proposals, drafts. Inside, not proposals. *TS of texts. Voice memos between her and him. Voice memos where she laughed, flirted, whispered little things like, "You make me feel like I matter again," and "I think about you all the time, even when I shouldn't." Even when I shouldn't. That phrase hit like a brick. It meant she knew. She knew she was crossing lines, that she was lying to me, to herself, to everyone. But it didn't stop her. She just made space for the guilt. She didn't avoid it. She accepted it, integrated it, made it part of her routine. That was worse than the affair itself. The normalization of the lie. I uploaded everything I found to a secure cloud account. I organized the evidence by type, messages, travel, financials, timeline discrepancies. I created a spreadsheet logging what I knew against what she had told me. It read like a forensic autopsy of our marriage. There was no part of me left that didn't believe she had emotionally and physically checked out a long time ago. I told my lawyer to begin the paperwork. He asked if I wanted to confront her first. No, I said. I want her to see it after I'm gone. He nodded. We crafted a simple plan. Nothing theatrical. Just the truth delivered clearly. One folder. One letter. One envelope. I wrote the letter myself. Not in anger, but with precision. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't an attack. It was a timeline. A mirror. A declaration of finality. It ended with one line. I didn't leave because you cheated. I left because you were willing to. The morning I planned to leave, I woke up earlier than usual. She was still asleep, breathing softly beside me. The same person I'd once waited hours in the cold to surprise with her favorite coffee. The same person I had held when her mom was in the hospital. The same person I thought I'd grow old with. Now just someone I shared a mortgage with and secrets she didn't know I'd uncovered. I packed a single suitcase. Nothing dramatic, just essentials. Enough to leave quietly. I placed the letter and the USB drive on the kitchen table, beside her half-used planner and a mug that still said "Best Wife Ever" in gold script. Before I walked out the door, I looked around the living room one last time. Every object felt like a prop. The framed photos, the throw pillows, the candles she lit when guests were over. A curated life. One she had used to mask what she'd really been doing behind the scenes. I stepped outside into the crisp morning air. My phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. Filed. I nodded to myself and got into the car. That was it. The moment it all became real. I didn't expect a response from her right away. And I didn't get one. 2 hours passed. Then 3. Then 5. By mid-afternoon, I saw the typing bubbles appear on my phone. Then disappear. Then appear again. Finally, a single message arrived. I got it. That was all she said. Not, I'm sorry. Not, please talk to me. Not, how could you do this? Just, I got it. Told me everything I needed to know. Later that evening, I received another message. It was longer, still careful. I didn't know you knew. I thought I could fix it before it became something I couldn't undo. I guess I waited too long. I don't blame you. I hope you're okay. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She didn't deny it. She didn't fight it. She didn't even offer an explanation. That told me everything about where her head had been for the past year. Floating between two realities, thinking she could have both and suffer none of the consequences. The next day, she didn't try to call. She didn't show up at my office. She didn't contact my friends or family. It was like she knew she'd already lost. Or maybe she had nothing left to defend. 2 weeks later, I got a message from her father. It was short. I'm sorry, son. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. She told us. I don't know what to say. Her sister messaged me the same evening. Shocked, apologetic, hurt on my behalf. I appreciated it, but I didn't have the energy to comfort anyone else. I thanked them both. Briefly, politely, but I didn't reach out again. This wasn't about damage control. It wasn't about vindication. It was about preservation. Of my sanity. Of my dignity. Of whatever was left of the person I had been before she took all those little pieces and handed them to someone else. The divorce moved fast. We didn't fight. She didn't contest the terms. She didn't request mediation or reconciliation. We met at a notary's office, signed the final documents, and walked out without speaking. She didn't look at me. I didn't try to meet her gaze. There were no final words. No last plea. No dramatic scene in the parking lot. Just the quiet acceptance that it was over. Not just the marriage, but the illusion of who she was, and the version of me that kept trying to believe it.